They called her a saint, a widow draped in black silk who prayed before every punishment. She donated to churches, knelt before icons, and whispered scripture as she tortured young girls to death. In 18th century Russia, where nobles ruled like gods and peasants were property, one woman turned faith into fear. Her name was Darya Saltykova, and she proved that sometimes the holiest faces hide the darkest hands. This is the story of the holy monster of Russia. If you believe history holds lessons we can't afford to forget, please like and subscribe to our channel. 18th century Russia was an empire built on faith and fear. The church blessed the throne blessed the nobles, and the serfs, millions of them, were left to pray for mercy that never came. A single name could decide whether you lived or vanished. To be born noble was to stand above consequence. To be born poor was to be owned. Among the families who prospered in this divine order was the Ivanov line, ancient blood, wealthy beyond measure, loyal to the crown and the cross. Their daughter, Darya Nikolaevna Ivanova, was raised on scripture and silence. Tutors praised her discipline. Priests called her pure of spirit. As a girl, she was taught two things: that obedience was holiness, and that sin could be washed away with prayer. When she married Captain Gleb Saltykov of the Royal Life Guards, her fortune doubled, and so did her illusion of divine purpose. They lived among marble icons, gilded mirrors, and servants who crossed themselves before daring to speak her name. The church adored her. She funded pilgrimages, kissed relics, and wept during confession. A model widow of Moscow, when Gleb died at just 26, the clergy called her suffering a trial from God. What they didn't see was what that trial awakened. For the first time, no man stood above her, no husband, no father, no authority. 600 souls now bore her family crest, lives measured not by breath, but by ownership. Power is a strange inheritance. In some, it breeds mercy. In others, revelation. For Darya Saltykova, it whispered a new gospel, that she was chosen to punish the unworthy. Her prayers grew longer, her temper sharper, and the manner that once rang with hymns began to echo with something else. Footsteps in the cellar, a door bolted after dusk, and a single candle flickering before an icon as someone screamed below. They called her the pious widow. But in truth, she was already learning how to kill and still call herself holy. After her husband's death, Darya Saltykova inherited more than land. She inherited command over servants, villages, and more than 600 souls who now existed by her will alone. For a time, she played the role expected of her, the grieving widow, the devoted mother, the woman who kissed icons and funded cathedrals. But somewhere between her prayers and her power, something fractured. They say her descent began with love. A young surveyor, Nikolai Tyuchov, visited her estate. Handsome, polite, a man who made her laugh again. When he left her for a younger woman, Darya's pride curdled into something unholy. Servants whispered that she ordered her men to kill him. Others said he escaped, leaving behind a heart that would never forgive betrayal. Whatever the truth, it changed her. At first, the punishments were small. A maid beaten for dust on a mirror, a cook struck for undersalted soup. She called it discipline, and afterwards she would pray for the sinner's soul. But cruelty, once tasted, demands repetition. Each beating became longer, each prayer quieter. And in the name of holiness, she perfected the art of pain. Servants were forced to flog one another until they collapsed. Others were burned with tongs heated in her kitchen fire. Some were left naked in a courtyard as snow fell. Penance, she called it, for laziness. God punishes the idle, she'd whisper, her voice calm as a sermon. Witnesses later said she never screamed, never raged. Her violence was measured, deliberate, almost ritualistic. Her manner became a cathedral of cruelty. Prayers were replaced by weeping. And still she gave money to the church. Still she confessed every Sunday, never once mentioning the blood beneath her nails. For 7 years the killings continued. The records say 38 murders. The people believed it was closer to 100. But numbers mean little when every victim had a name, a face, a voice that once prayed to the same God she did. The walls of her estate absorbed those prayers, until even the stones seemed to echo them back. Forgive us, Lady, forgive us. And she did, by killing them. For years, her manor stood untouched, a world of hymns and horror, hidden behind stone walls and noble privilege. The neighbors whispered, but no one interfered. Who would accuse a countess of murder? The magistrates dined at her table. The priests blessed her offerings. And every coin she gave to the church bought her another layer of silence. But silence, no matter how deep, always cracks. The first were the mothers, women whose daughters had been sent to the manor and never returned. They wrote petitions, begging for mercy, for answers. 20 letters in all, each one crushed under the weight of her name. The second were her own servants, those who had buried bodies under frozen earth, who had watched friends vanish one by one. Among them were 2 men who had lost everything, Savely Martinov and Yermolai Ilyin. Between them, Darya had murdered 3 of their wives. They knew what awaited them if they stayed, and they knew there was no justice left in Moscow. So one night, as snow fell like ash across the fields, they fled. It was more than escape. It was rebellion. They walked for weeks through frozen forests, hiding by day, moving by moonlight, carrying nothing but a petition written in trembling ink. Their destination, St. Petersburg. Their goal, the throne itself. At the time, the empire had a new ruler, Empress Catherine the Great, eager to prove her reign would bring light to a corrupt world. When the 2 men arrived at her court, half-starved and near collapse, they placed their petition at her feet. Inside were the names of the dead, the dates, the punishments, and a plea that could no longer be ignored. Catherine read it in silence. Then she whispered to her advisors, "If these words are true, then no crown is safe." Within days, the order was given. For the first time, the empire would turn its gaze toward the manor on the hill and the woman who ruled it through faith and fear. Catherine the Great had seized power only months before the petition reached her court. She knew that if she ruled by fear, she would die by it. So when the case of Countess Saltykova arrived, soaked in blood and scandal, she saw not just a crime, but an opportunity. If nobles can murder the poor without consequence, she said, then the crown itself is worth nothing. Within days, a commission of magistrates rode out from St. Petersburg to the Saltykova estate. What they found was not a manor, it was a mausoleum. Beneath the stone floors, shallow graves. In the ledgers, missing names. In every corner, silence. The servants flinched at footsteps, the overseers feigned ignorance, and the priests crossed themselves when questioned. At first, no one dared speak, but the Empress's seal carried weight greater than fear. Slowly, confessions emerged. whispered at night, signed at dawn. A stable boy led investigators to a well filled with bones. A maid described the smell of iron and wax beneath the chapel. One priest, trembling, admitted he had buried girls without rites. The evidence mounted. For 6 years, the investigation dragged on. 6 years of interviews, exhumations, and quiet bribes from those who still tried to shield her. Yet, by 1768, the truth was undeniable. Darya Saltykova, noblewoman of Moscow, was found guilty of 38 murders with evidence of over 100 more. Catherine faced a dilemma. Russia had abolished the death penalty. Executing a woman of noble blood could shatter her political alliances, but releasing her would destroy her credibility. So the Empress chose a punishment that would be remembered for generations. On an October morning, Darya Saltykova was chained in Red Square. Around her neck hung a sign, "This woman has tortured and murdered." Crowds filled the square, peasants, priests, nobles, staring at the woman who once ruled by divine right. She stood motionless as they jeered. Her lips moved silently, perhaps a prayer, perhaps defiance. After an hour, she was led away, stripped of title, stripped of privilege, and delivered to the Ivanovsky convent. There, the cell was waiting. A stone box beneath the ground, no window, no light. A single candle was lit, only when food was pushed through the grate. For 11 years, she lived in that darkness. When they finally moved her to a higher cell, she was no longer a woman, just a whisper that cursed and prayed in the same breath. She would remain there for 33 years. And though her body decayed, her legend grew, not as a tale of justice, but as a warning. In the end, the Countess of Saltykova vanished from history's stage. No execution, no redemption, just silence. They said that in her final years, she muttered verses from Scripture, the same prayers she once whispered before each beating. When she died in 1801, the city barely noticed. The bells of Moscow rang for the coronation of a new century, not for the death of a woman buried beneath it. But her story did not die with her. The trial of Darya Saltykova shook the empire. It was one of the only times a noble had ever been punished for crimes against serfs, a signal to the people that even saints could bleed. Yet nothing changed. The serf system, the very order that made monsters possible, endured for almost another 100 years. The peasants still bowed, the nobles still prayed, and the cross still hung over doors that hid cruelty behind its shadow. Darya became a myth, the holy monster, a name whispered in sermons and folklore, compared to Elizabeth Batthory, invoked to frighten children into obedience. But maybe the truth is simpler. Maybe she wasn't a monster born of madness, but of permission. A woman raised to believe her power was holy. That suffering could be sanctified. That faith could wash away anything, even blood. Her story remains a mirror, not of evil alone, but of the hands that blessed it. Because fear doesn't die when its master does. It lingers, it waits, it learns new prayers, and somewhere, in every age, there's always another altar.